welcome. We have why we play. Why we play. So for the next 60 minutes, that's what we're going to look at. We're going to really drill into not only why we play, what our motivations are, but also look at categorizing people. I want you to think about the games that you enjoyed as a child and start thinking about why you enjoyed those games. What brought you pleasure? Why did you keep playing? Now, you could do that as an adult, but I don't know about you, but as an adult, I don't spend a lot of time playing. The reason I play the game that I play often on my phone is to check out while I'm doing other things. Like it works perfectly. For instance, I could play it while watching and listening to a webinar, for instance. Okay, so in childhood, we had more time to play. Okay, and so that's what I want you to think about back then. Now, I live in an age where the board game era was just starting to give way to the video game era, and so my sister, for instance, really loved the game of life. And she could play it for hours, and she was always bugging me to play this game. On the other hand, life wasn't for me. I didn't like that game. The game that I liked was Othello. Much more complicated. There's quick, very clear winners and losers. There's strategy. Their tagline is a minute to learn, a lifetime to master. So when we look at two children, same household, same pretty much everything the same, why were these two very, very different games? Why was she always wanting to play one, never wanted to play mine? I'd roll my eyes when I would play her game with her. I want to give you a little insight into me. I was a nerd. I actually was into the Rubik's Cube. And so the Rubik's Cube was very, very fascinating to me, and I'd spent hours learning this thing. I didn't go learn a book. I didn't go learn from a book or a program or anything like that. I invented my own strategy. And in fact, back in the 80s, I guess, the last time I looked at this, my final move, I'm the only person that I know of that used that move for the final move. So this is all kind of nerdy stuff here, but why was I spending all this time on the Rubik's Cube? My sister wanted to play the game of life. And so when we think about what brought us to these games, why did one person enjoy one and not the other, I want to also look at what does this mean for the learning environment. So why would someone engage in learning? What makes it fun for some people, fun for others, and the poor little kid on the left there. Same thing in our workplace. How do we engage employees so that they're not bored and so that they are motivated and having a good time? And so that's what we want to look at here today. So one of the concepts that you often hear from me is this idea of self-hugging. Dr. Stephen Reese said, not only do we think everybody should be like us, but we believe that they are like us. So I would assume as a child that everybody would like the game Othello, and in fact they didn't. It was really, really hard for me to find people to play with me. In fact, I was such a loser, I guess, or loner, that I'd actually play myself, and that's how I developed my strategies. When we'd come to that realization of self-hugging, why would I expect, or I did, in fact, expect everybody to enjoy what I enjoyed? And it's the same thing with our programs. So we're going to look at the Reese Motivational Profile here, and we'll delve into it a little bit as we're going through, but this is mine. And so you see there's average right there in the middle. Yellow is average. Then we have weak desire on the left, which is the red side, and the green side is strong desire. And you'll see that while I think I am very normal and very average, in fact, I'm not. There's very few things here where I am in the average range. I'm extremely not normal, and those of you who know me know this to be true. All right, so when we look at, I want to take you back to caveman days. And as a species, we started to look around us, and we started to define our universe and our environment. And as we developed language, we were able to pass on questions and stories and what we had learned along the way because we now had language. And so we began to define our environment. Now, one of the things that made it easier for us to pass along our knowledge is generalization and categorization. So, for instance, tiger is bad. Right? We can communicate that to the little kid there relatively easily. Tiger is bad. All tigers are bad. We wanted to generalize and categorize to save the species. All tigers are bad. Not this one might be bad, that one might be okay. And so as we developed, we also had societies because we could look at each other and see that we were different. This is our tribe, we look different or have a different language than that other tribe. Or even inside the tribe, we could look around and we could say, that person looks different than the other person. That one we called a man, that one we called a woman. They had different biological functions, and in our society we also assigned roles to them, putting them in categorizing and generalizing. So all women did this and all men did this. Well, the problem is we don't fit nicely into those categories. Okay? You don't want to say, hey, look at all women believe this or all men believe that. And so we don't fit nicely into these categories. In fact, when we look at what NASA sent out to the universe here to represent all of humanity, right, not too many of us look like those two folks over there. And so, again, we don't fit nicely into these categories. Early on in the species, we were fascinated with the stars and the movement of the stars. And we started to generalize that when people were born in a certain month, certain lunar cycle, they had certain characteristics. So in a certain month, we'd say, oh, everybody born in this month has characteristics of a bull over there at Taurus. And they're very strong versus this other month over here, they're kind of fishy, they're water signs, and so on. And so we started generalizing and categorizing. Of course, the problem is not everybody born in a certain month follows those same categories. So we had to make it a little more complex. We had to do something like, we had rising suns and setting suns to account for these differences. And then, of course, I was in the Western society, the Chinese. What they did is they went more to nature instead of the stars. But they did it differently. They said everybody born in this year, a specific year, had these characteristics. So that's 365 days of births, and that's a lot of people. Well, they have the same problem is that let's say you were exactly 12 years younger than me, exactly. So you would be a horse, like I'm a horse, but we would have different characteristics. So what they did is they would say, well, yeah, but then there's the metals. So I would be a metal horse, you might be a wood horse, and then not only that they also had colors. So I'm a red horse, a metal horse, you might be a, I don't know, blue wood horse or whatever. Okay, so again, we're not fitting nicely into these categories. Then Hippocrates came along and he said, no, it's not up in the stars, it's not nature. Humans are the top of creation, and so we need to look inside of us. And being very Greek, he loved a square because all the angles are the same and the lines are all the same. And and the number 4 is very, very important because it's a magical number to the ancient Greeks. 2 plus 2 is 4, 2 times 2 is 4, and so on. So he was looking around and he categorized people according to body fluids. Okay, so you have your bile, your phlegm, your blood, and so on. So the 4 body fluids, or his 4 body fluids, he would categorize people in these different squares, which then, of course, would line up with the 4 elements. So Hippocrates and then Aristotle started categorizing in this area, and so time went by for a little bit. Of course, the Chinese were a little more complex with the I Ching, and so they had the octagon, but similar concept of trying to categorize folks. And then this guy came along called Carl Jung, and he started talking about this mystical, it's very mystical idea of a super consciousness that all of us come into and out of. It kind of permeates all of humans. And so he turned back to this model and of categorizing humans, and then it was picked up by Catherine Briggs and then her daughter Isabel Myers-Briggs in the 1950s. They created this profile, if you will, for categorizing people according to the Jungian mysticism. And so this didn't catch on. It wasn't until kind of the New Age movement in the 1980s that this whole idea of categorizing people in these four categories really caught on. But again, the problem that we ran into is that I might say, oh, that person is phlegmatic or that person is a sanguine. I don't fit nicely into these categories. I'm like, well, I'm a little of this, I'm a little of that. So that's where they got a little more complicated. With the Myers-Briggs folks, broke the quadrants into more quadrants. Some folks go back to the good old Chinese octagon. And then, of course, we had other things coming out of it, like a DISC would say, well, you're 34% of this, you're 3% of that, you're not directly in a column. So this is just the struggle that we've had with categorizing humans. Now, let's bring it to gamification. We're doing the same thing with the different player types. So we have the quadrants are still in play and the octagon still in play and so on. So again, we have trouble making people fit into these nice little categories. So what if we did it the other way around? What if instead of generalizing and categorizing, we approached it from a different direction? Okay, and that's what I want you to think about here. So turning to good old Simon Sinek here in his golden circle, what Simon says that most organizations know their what, a few know their how. Okay, here's what we produce, here's how we produce it. We're a restaurant who serves hamburgers, here's how we make the hamburgers. He says successful companies and successful people, by the way, know their why. Here's our why, here's how we do what we do. So he uses the example, say, of Apple and different people like say Martin Luther King Jr. and so on, who have a very clear why. So that's what I want us to do here is why are we in these different categories? Okay? So the what and the how might be the player types, okay? But why am I in that player category? And so again, we're turning things differently here. And for this, that's where we turn to the work of Dr. Stephen Rees. I mentioned him earlier. Dr. Rees is very academic in his approach, and so he said, if we want to know what motivates people, instead of coming up with some categories or observing people, why not just go and ask them? This radical concept. So started out 80,000 people across 4 continents. Okay, so Europe and Asia, U.S., and so what am I missing? Oh, Australia. And you just ask people, why do they do what they do? And originally, he had over 500, quote, motivators. People would say, well, I do this, I do this. He whittled it down to 300. Okay? In other words, someone would say, well, motivated by money, I'm motivated by wealth. Well, there's lots of things that money gives us. Money gives us security. Money gives us status. Money gives us, puts order into our lives, and so on. So then he put it into a computer, ran the computer model and so on, and then originally there was 15. So he published his paper, said here's what it was. There was some challenge. It was peer-reviewed back and forth, and so the 16th savings, which you'll see here in a little bit, was determined that this was a separate core desire, if you will. Since then, dozens, probably over 100 now peer-reviewed articles. It is used as a predictor of behavior in clinical environments. The military, the U.S. military, for instance, uses a version of the Rees motivational profile to predict who will suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome, used in school systems and so on. So very scientific base here. So let's bring this.
Okay, I want to make something very clear here. Okay, and this is very important. I want you to hear this. In fact, if you notice that my vocal quality is different or the slides may be different, I am actually editing this into the original program that was recorded live. Okay, so this is coming after the live version, and it's because I had this realization. What we are looking at here is the why. When we're talking about the Rees motivational profile, we're talking about why people do what they do. Okay, so let's go back to our good old Simon Sinek here. When we look at other programs or what's been happening up till more recently, say with Rees and certainly the work that Gallup poll has done with strength finders, is when we're able now to look at large data so we can get to the why. Everything else has been observed over time. Okay, so when we look at Myers-Briggs, for instance, established in the 50s, and then on from there on, that's a lot of observations. A lot of people have gone through the Myers-Briggs thing, and then the offshoots, the discs and the colors and the animals and all of these things that have offshooted from there have worked. There's a large numbers that have been observed over time. These are very, very impactful on the how and the what. How people communicate, how they make decisions, how they live their lives, what they do, what they like. It's not necessarily wrong. It becomes out of the why. So that's where we start here at Sententia, is we start with the why. Why do people play in the first place? Now, once they engage, now they take on certain characteristics. Now we can observe their behaviors as player types. So we could have the killers, the achievers, the collaborators, the competers, and so on. We can have different player types out of the whys. Okay? So that's the difference here. It's not a right or wrong thing. It's that we're looking at different levels, if you will. So for instance, I was looking at a profile from somebody who went through the level 2 certification. And so she was sharing with me that in the DISC system, which is on the far right there, at least is the representation that I grabbed for this presentation, she said she has high I believe this is what she told me if my memory is correct, high I and S. What was interesting in this is that her profile, her Reese motivational profile, she has extremely low social contact. Just doesn't like people, doesn't like contact with people, I should say. She's a lovely person, nice person, but personally she doesn't like hanging out with people very much. And she is extremely independent, not a big team player. Well, when you look at this, if you look at the disc, that doesn't make a lot of sense, because usually someone in influence would be high social contact, steadiness, be in touch with people, you would care about people, want to work as a team and a group. In her case, what was interesting, while she didn't like social contact, liked to work alone, she was extremely high acceptance and high status. Okay? Now, if you think about it, when someone is high acceptance, the only way we get acceptance is from other people. And to get that acceptance, what we need to be is intuitive, so we know what it is that they prize. In other words, if I'm high acceptance, I need to be able to intuit what you would want from me, so that you will give me some praise, so that you will say, wow, great, thank you. Therefore, she needs to go out there and to get acceptance from other folks. Same thing with status. The only way we get status is from other folks, okay? And so this is where the influence comes in, because to get status, we need to convince other people, if you will, to yield that status on us. We need to be recognized as successful, recognized for our position, and so on, okay? So the point is, her whys created a very interesting how and what. In this case, using the disc. So I'm not putting down disc by any means. It was just very fascinating to know how her whys yielded her disc profile. I don't want you to hear me saying these are necessarily wrong. It's just a different, they're limited because they're based on observation. All that's different here is the whys, all right? So yes, I do have a bias, admitting my bias, because I'm high curious. So of course I'm going to have a bias toward something like the Reese motivational profile. Yeah, I have a bias against, say, astrology. It certainly sounds valid, seems valid, and perhaps they are. I don't know. But the point is, if we drive all the way down to the why, then we create the hows and the whats from there. Okay, so we're going to get back into the regularly scheduled program here, but I just wanted to make sure that you heard from me that what we are talking about here is the why. We're not putting down the other profiles, because they become very valuable, especially when we don't know who we're going to work with. We don't know who our players are. All right, so here we go.
So let's bring this back to us. Here is three profiles here, again, average in the middle, high and lows. And so this is where we can start to see where we are different. where we are different. So if you came to the folks here at Sententia, this is three of us here at Sententia, Darren on the left there, Monica in the middle, I'm on the right, you would start to see where we are similar, but also where we are different. So as a company, we could come through, and if you look at Curious there, we're all high curious. That's why we're in this realm called gamification. What is this? What's the cutting edge? What's the latest? How can all this relate together? Tend to all on the expedient side, at least Monica and I are on the expedient side. So as a company, we're going to do whatever it takes to achieve our goals. What's another one? Idealism. We're all low on the idealism. We're very pragmatic and very practical. We're not here to save the world, folks. We have no mission or something like this to save the world. We're very pragmatic, very practical. We want our customers to be successful in gamification. That's it. So what can we do that you can apply directly to your folks, to what you're working on right now? We could also look at this and say, well, who should have different roles? So if you drop to the bottom there, so vengeance, extremely low for Monica, relatively low for Darren. On the other hand, you have me over there on the high side. So perhaps I would be the role in marketing, getting the message out. Okay, so instead of being nice and yielding to our competition, why not have someone on the higher side of vengeance actually out there working? Okay, so that's where we start to look at our differences. Okay, what makes us different? Okay, so inside of the 16 motivators, what I call the 16 whys, okay, because this is why we do what we do, I've identified 14 of them that directly impact why we play. Okay, so I've listed them here. And again, we have more discussion for this. If you did not get your download for the description of each of the 16 motivators, email us. You had several links at the end of this program. I'll also send out an email making sure everybody had access to those descriptors. But there are two that I call the outliers, and that's eating and food. Okay, we all have the need to eat. That's to survive. All of the 16 whys are all about survival. Okay, so eating, we need to eat. Some people it's high, it's low, but it's not necessarily why we play. Right? Now, children play with their food, certainly, but it's not directly related to why we would play. Now, on the other hand, if someone's high eating, this would be a great reward. I mean, when you achieve, let's say your group wins, or you reach a level, you get lunch for the team, okay? Or a free lunch for you directly. See, eating as a motivator would be a great reward. Now, that wouldn't really motivate someone who is low motivated eating. Family, same thing. Let's say the reward is flex time, so now you get to leave at 3 o'clock. Well, someone who's high motivated family can now go to their child's football game. Okay, so that's where we're looking at these two. Like I said, they're outliers. I'll go through these relatively quickly here because we can cycle back around to them. Why would someone want to play Life? Okay, now Life, for those of you that haven't played it, it's just a game. It's a board game. You spin the wheel, then you move wherever it is, and then you're on that spot. And then because of that, you go through life. So you may go to school, you may go to college, you may get a degree, you may get a job, you get children, you get nicer cars, and so on. Maybe acceptance, because you'd be complying with something, might work in this way. Certainly not curiosity. If you're highly motivated by curious, you could read the game board and you could see all the stops along the way. Okay, so it'd be very, very easy if you're high curious to learn the game maybe in 10 minutes. Expediency, there's not a way to really to game the system here. The rules are defined. You have to do what you do. You have to play a role, and so on. There's no way to really get ahead. Idealism, maybe because it's about life and so on, might come into play there. Interdependence, playing against each other. Order, it's very ordered, it's very prescribed, you know where you're going, and there's no physical activity, there's no real use of power, there's no willpower, there's nothing really to overcome. Savings, maybe you get to collect children along the way. Social contact, of course you're working with people. Status, you're building status, you're moving up, you're getting mansions and so on. Tranquility, it's pretty safe, but vengeance, it's really hard to really win. at this game. Okay, versus Othello over there, acceptance, probably not. Curiosity, certainly. How can we do better? What can we what's a better strategy? Expediency, because we're going to win. What's the most efficient way, effective way to get to my goal? Now, there's still very defined rules. We don't have the ability to cheat or cut corners with Othello. Interdependence, order, it's got squares and so on. Power, because we are dominant. It takes a lot of willpower to succeed in Othello. It takes a lot of work, a lot of concentration. Savings, social contact, status, when I don't know if there's much status, but certainly for vengeance, because there is a very, very clear winner. And as the game winds down, not only do you win, you wipe them out. And so you don't just win like, oh, well, look, I won. No, you win. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. So let's get back to self-hugging here. See, the concept is we'll create games that we enjoy, and we assume that everybody else does. So for instance, when we go through that list, the reason I didn't like the game of life is because there was no way for me to win, to dominate, to work hard through everything. Okay, I just was not able to do that. It was all up to chance. Someone else decided what the game board was, and then I'd spin the little dial, and then that's what determined if I went and if I won or didn't win. Okay, so for me, there's no pleasure in that because there's no way for me to win this game based on my own wit, okay, certainly via chance. So on the other side of it, if I'm going through and I'm creating programs for other people, right, and this is where self-hugging comes in for those of us in gamification, if I'm creating programs for other people, I'm going to create games that I enjoy. And this is where we talk about blind spots, and this becomes where most of the time we fail as designers. Okay? Again, looking at me, where I would fail is I would create a program that has way too much reading, way too much information, because I'm high curious, most people are low curious, or average to low curious. And so I would tend to create things that people would bore them, they would check out. I'm high expediency. My blind spot here is how important tradition is to certain people. Rules are important to a lot of people, not to me. Idealism, blind spot would be people might want me to appeal to a higher cause. They might want to say that, well, instead of just focusing on work, what else is out there? Look at that interdependence. That one's a big one. I don't like working in groups. Groups frustrate me. I would tend to create programs that did not involve working with others, certainly not teamwork. And yet that's very, very important to gamification. So that's a huge blind spot for me. Order, low order. So I would create environments that don't have a lot of structure. People like structure. They like to know where they're headed. And so that would be a huge blind spot for me. I'd create programs that would not be effective for other people. Hopefully by now what you're getting is the sense it's our blind spots that cause the issues and problems for us. So step one, when we're looking at the process of gamification, is of course we need to know our blind spots. We need to know our blind spots. So what are your blind spots? What are mine? Because then we can anticipate where our issues will be when we're creating for other folks. When you're thinking about this, if you're creating games that you play, maybe you've had this experience where you're really excited about something. Maybe let's say it's technology. You bought something, or you're going on vacation or something, and you had a lot of passion and excitement about it, and you shared it with someone else, and they weren't as engaged. Okay, they weren't as involved with it. And they're like, yeah, okay, whatever. See, the difference is that is just a difference in your profile. It's not a right or wrong thing. Same thing for those of us in training here. We might say, well, what are our blind spots? So the Reese motivational profile gives us that insight, because it's really hard to know where we are unlike other people. Okay? How do I know that I'm different from you? Because again, I assume that everybody is like me. Again, for those option one, here's with level 2 certification, and many of you have gone through level 2 certification. You know it's already part of the Reese Motivational Profile is part of that program. Just to announce here that we do have a live level 2 certification coming up July 15 and 16 in Houston, and our next online one. So our next one will be May 2 to May 4. So by signing up for that, then you'll get the Reese Motivational Profile. And then right away you'll know what your blind spots are. I'll sit down with you, have a well, not sit down with you, I'll virtually sit down with you and have a conversation. Or we can, without level 2 certification, of course, we can still grab the Reese Motivational Profile. You can see the link there. Again, after you go through the profile, then I'll contact you and we'll have our 30 minutes, at least 30 minutes talking about it. All right, so we have these two options for you. By the way, those of you who have gone through level 2 certification and haven't gone through the Reese Motivational Profile yet, please do that so we can get you scheduled. Okay, so anyway, the point here is that know your blind spots. Know your blind spots. The second thing is, once we know our blind spots, is to know our participants or our players. Who will we be working with? What's common among them? Okay, so here's what I did. Grab the first 12. All right, it looks confusing to you, but I just to put it up here graphically. First 12 folks going through level 2 certification. Okay, so you might do a similar thing if you were to create a program. What you could do is go to a test sample of who your player types might be. You just have them take the profile, and then you could look at similar data. Again, you'd lay it out differently than we're looking at here, but I just wanted to give you a graphic demonstration here. Now, really quickly, I know what these are, but see the bottom of each of these? That's vengeance. Okay, so if you look up there in the upper left-hand corner, that person is almost dead average on vengeance. Pretty much everybody in going through this, going through level 2 certification has been average to low vengeance. Not everybody, but most people. So what this would say, if we were to create a training program for this group, level 2, winning is not necessarily important to this group. Okay. There's many other factors and many other things we could look at, but we don't need to create a design element for winning. Okay, so that this individual, like, I will conquer and I'm number 1, okay, that won't be as important. So having a leaderboard, for instance, wouldn't be as important to this group. We could have other elements that coming into play, but that would not be as dominant. Now, the third one down is curiosity. If you look again, let's take the upper left-hand corner one there. See how it's like average and then low on the beauty side, and then curiosity is the next one. So just a little still in the yellow area, but pretty much the one right next to it is still in the yellow area, but on the low side of curiosity. But no one is low curious. And in fact, we have some real high curious folks in this group. So, of course, because gamification is the cutting edge, there's a lot of research going on. It takes a lot of reading, especially if you think that doing this online would be very, very difficult because there's a lot of information that you have to go through. And so curiosity has driven a lot of people to gamification, and specifically Sententia. Now, if I were to create level 2, I would also need to look at my own blind spots. Look at my own blind spots, and then start to look at my group. Where might I develop something, apply certain game mechanics that would actually push certain people away? But I want to make sure wherever my blind spot is that I also offer some mechanics that would appeal to those folks. Okay? So that's what we're looking at here. So that would be the next step. The third step is to look at your outliers. Your outliers. So this person over here is the outlier. He is going through the level 2 certification, but look at that vengeance. This guy loves to play. He loves to win. So we have to anticipate that we will have those outliers. So if I create a program for all the level 2 folks, and we really don't have a way to win, this guy's going to find a way to win. He's going to develop inside of our system a way to win, how to come out on top. You also notice up there the third one, also oddly enough, is low expediency. I mean, low curiosity. That's the third one down. Why might he be drawn to an online course? It's a lot of work and so on. Well, perhaps, see, if he's in a live one, he's going to have to go through the program the way we present it, in the manner that we present it, and work with others. Online, he can find a way to skirt things, have a shortcut, because notice, well, I noticed that he's high expediency. You wouldn't necessarily know by looking at the profile without the words next to it. He's going to find the quickest, the best way to get to where he's going and to win. So for him, the curiosity, and that's low curiosity, he recognizes that gamification is cutting edge. Right? If his company puts into place gamification, they will dominate in their market. Okay? So they will dominate over the competition. They'll be ahead. They will be, and so that's why he's motivated to go through these things. So even if someone say low motivated curious, we can still motivate them, okay, by appealing to other motivators, other whys, to comply. So like I said, in this case, he is going through a lot of work. And those of you in level 2 certification, especially in the online, know that it's a lot of work. It's a lot of reading. It's a lot of thinking, and so on. But he's willing to do it so that he can win. And so in this case, so that his company can win. Okay, so we need to be aware of the outliers. Not that we necessarily have to create programs for them, but to just realize that these are the folks, in his case, in the example I'm giving here, is he's going to, while we watch him go through the process, now we will learn where some of the holes will be in the future. Okay, so it's a good person to track, and certainly after the program to debrief, to say, hey, what worked, what didn't work, what corners did you cut, and how did you succeed in this environment? So we have these options. Now, again, if you're just looking at a sampling, you wouldn't necessarily see the outlier, so you just need to anticipate that they're there. Because remember, we don't fit nicely into categories. Not all somebody's are not all, because we don't have a quadrant system here. Okay? We have tendencies, but we're not putting people into specific quadrants. Again, you want to know what your blind spots are, then you look at your players, anticipate what the outliers are, and then of course the next step would be applying the game mechanics to their whys. Okay? Now, this is something we're not taking the time to cover here. We'll cover it later, especially for those in the level 2 certification. But now that we understand what the whys are, why are people playing, why are they engaged, now we can link to the mechanics to the actual motivation. So if you, for instance, if you went through level 1 certification, you remember the experience of having the different cards, and so you'd have a motivator, a why there, and then some mechanics. And so you've already gone through the beginning of this back and forth. But at a bigger level, the mechanics, what makes the mechanics work is because they're appealing to different whys, Okay? So for instance, with acceptance, well, this is easy. Let's do it this way. Points, badges, leaderboards. Okay, the good old points, badges, leaderboards. So points might work for an acceptance-motivated person. Okay? Why? Because they want to make sure that they get enough points to, if you get a point, then someone says, hey, good job, you got a point, right? Beauty doesn't come into play. Curiosity, it might come into play, but not directly. Expediency, is there a way for me, because now you've established a goal, so how can I get the most points the most efficient way as possible? So it does come into play for expediency, not really for idealism. Interdependence or independent, depending on if you're high or low in the interdependent, points might work, okay, because it allows us for our team to know that we're progressing, or me individually, I'm progressing. Somewhat orderly, but not directly related. Of course, has nothing to do with physical activity. Power, if you make it difficult to acquire points, okay, I'm going to spend a lot of time and effort now to get those points. That'll be fun for me, because I'm high power. Someone who's high power, it'll be fun to grab those points. On the other side, someone who's low motivated power, they're going to give up too early. Right? They'll be like, who cares? Savings, of course, collecting points might be fun. Status, I have more points than you do, look at me. Tranquility, it actually creates a little risk, a little tension for them. And of course, vengeance, if I can make sure I get all the points, then this will be really great, and then I won. But on the vengeance side, if you have a group that's high vengeance, it's not just the collection of points, it's what can I do to take your points away. Because remember, it's not just winning, it's winning big. Okay, so that's points. Badges, same thing. Acceptance, hey, it's nice to get a badge. Hey, good, I've achieved something. Beauty, if they're beautiful badges, right? Curiosity, we don't really care unless it's acknowledgement of my curiosity. Expediency, same thing. How can I get there the fastest? What badges are better than others? Is there a way to do a workaround? Expediency, idealism, not really. Interdependence, independence, depends. Order, not really. Physical activity, again, power, depending on how difficult it is to get the badges. If everybody gets a ribbon, right, for a power person, why try? It's actually a non-motivator, a demotivator. And why even try if it's no big deal? On the other hand, if it's too difficult, low power people will give up. Savings, it's one more thing to collect. Status, of course, you yield status to it, but again, if everybody gets a ribbon, it loses its status. It has no status for it. So we have to be very, very careful, not just in the mechanic we use, but how it's applied. Vengeance, same thing. I can collect badges, but I need to also make sure I can take yours away. Right? Leaderboards, for acceptance folks, it's going to be a demotivator, because they don't necessarily want to be number one. In fact, they'd be very uncomfortable being at the top of the leaderboard. So you think it would be a good thing, but it would actually work against them. It would work against. Now, I don't want to be low, right? because that would also be disappointing to everybody, but it would add a lot of stress for them. Just the leaderboard in general adds a lot of stress for them. Expediency, again, the fastest way, the best, most efficient way to get to the top of the leaderboard. Idealism might work against, because it's very egotistical. I am number one. Right? Idealism, would be more about the group doing good for what's out there in the environment and team, and what's our mission and goals and all those types of things. So a leaderboard might actually work against the idealisms. Power, again, to work really hard to get acknowledged for striving to be number one. But again, power is different than status, so someone may work really hard, but they don't care that they're at the top of the leaderboard. They really don't care because it's internal. If I worked really hard for this badge, I worked really hard for this points, that's good. A high power person doesn't necessarily care that they're up on that leaderboard. Well, say sales training. Let's say you're doing sales training. This would come into play here. Leaderboards, of course. Why? Because probably if you've been in sales and been successful at sales, probably, or certainly average, but maybe high vengeance, because it's a lot of work. You got to get out there, you got to hustle, and you got to convince people to not just go with your product, but to not go with your competing product. And so this is where a leaderboard might be very effective in that environment, but not as effective in another group or another environment. For those folks in level 2, just to give you a heads up, have a follow-up webinar to this next week, and I am working on a paper, being high curious. I've been working on this, but we will be looking at the mechanics and applying the different mechanics to the actual 14 Ys. So you will be getting that shortly. For the rest of you, again, start with those blind spots. Look at why you do what you do, and also know your players. Here's the point, folks, though. When you're creating, begin with your own blind spots. Know who your players are, and then make the mechanics apply to the why so that we can have fun when we're playing, okay? And that's what too often when we're looking at, we focus on our end results, which is the Sententia model. What are the objectives? What do we want to achieve? But ultimately, using the game mechanics to add the fun back into it. And so what is fun to me will be different than what is fun to you. All right, folks, so thanks for going through this with me. Thanks to everybody for participating, and we'll see you down the road.